People who have a job where they go into other people's homes, plumbers, electricians, etc., what's the weirdest, most disturbing thing you've seen while working in a customer's house? Story 1. I did desktop support for a medical imaging company. All of the transcriptionists work at home, so I would often have to go into their homes to support their desktops. One time, a woman called into the help desk because her computer was making a weird noise and smelled like something was burning, so I was dispatched to her house, and when I walked in, the house was, to put it lightly, in disarray. I went into her office, afraid to touch anything, and there was her desk amongst various dirty dishes, takeout boxes, pizza boxes. I go under her desk and unplug her desktop and go to open it, and I see cockroaches scurry out from inside the desktop. I don't mean a couple. I mean hundreds. I jump back and swipe one that managed to start up my pants leg, and there's a swarm of dong roaches pouring out of this desktop. I leave the house and immediately call my supervisor and tell him what I found, and tell him that I refuse to go back into that house. I walk to my car and I'm totally booked out. I strip down naked next to my car, I'm not kidding, and put my clothes in the trunk. I drive directly to my house and pull into the back. I toss my clothes into the garbage, including my shoes. I hosed myself down in the backyard, went immediately into my bathroom from there, and took the hottest shower I have ever taken. The next day, my boss pulled me into the office to write me up for not finishing my day in the office, and I immediately asked for an HR rep. When the HR rep got there, I explained what happened, and the HR rep told me that it would be in the best interest to not write me up, because I could sue and probably win. I left that job a month later. The only thing I would have done differently is I'd have burned the clothes. I was thinking that too. I work with computers. I have dust blowers. I blow out those computers every week. I don't want it. I've never had anything like this happening to me, and I never hope to. And that person should definitely have taken pictures, because that way he'd also have proof. Story 2. Quite a while back, I used to install high-end entertainment systems, home theaters, and distributed audio for people who didn't know what to do with their money. Smallest house we ever worked on was a 7,500 square feet. My boss called me in to do a distributed audio and cascade lighting system in a new construction. We spent about an hour with the client, nice guy, building a 14K square foot house. First floor was your typical rich person's place. Library, study, game room, great room labeled ballroom, and dining room. Up the hill slightly was the second level, kind of staring up the slope. 3 suites and a 6-bedroom attached guest house. Down the slope on the way to the shore of the lake, it was a gym, a kitchen, a theater, and then a room labeled special. I'm like, eh? He had very specific requirements for special. Very, very high-end hidden speakers, a screen that came out of a hidden ceiling pocket, multimedia projector in a hidden pocket in the rear. Mind you, this was a while ago, so this stuff was very, very expensive. We do the job, things work, and in my mind, special means multi-person spicy room or something. About 6 months after he moved into the place, I got a call for tech support. Since the hidden pockets were a custom job, I figured that was it. Turns out it was a burnt bulb on the projector, and I discovered what special was. It was a chapel with a 1-person pew in front of an absolute shrine, Orthodox icons on every surface of the walls, shelves around the room with relics, like illegal relics, like human remains transported internationally relics, Christian antiques, by my masters in religion no less than 500 to 1,300 years old. I'm very secretive about this. Please don't let anyone know I have it. Oh, I told people. I didn't tell anyone his name, and I won't, because outwardly he's a nice, giving, charitable man. But that room weirded me out massively. And this guy was in the right place at the right time, being a master's in religion, to look at this place so he could pinpoint the date. That's impressive. But yeah, when you think a special room in a rich person's house, you don't think chapel. You don't think that like this. And if he had all of this stuff in the room, what was he doing with the projection screen? Was he just playing Indiana Jones on repeat? Story 3. I am a journeyman house painter by trade, and I've been self-employed in the profession for over 20 years now. About 10 years ago, I was going to paint an older woman's home. She was probably 75. I was painting the kitchen and the attached small family dining area. All of the furniture was moved, carpets were out, pictures off the walls. This place was ready for paint. I always start by removing the faceplates from outlets and switches. First one, just 2 screws. Pulled the plate off and found the outlet full of termites. Packed. Unalive, thankfully. But this was an indication of something bigger happening here. I went and asked the woman about it, and when she saw it, she called her representative at ABC Pest Company to come over immediately. After explaining the situation, he was quickly on his way. I went to standby mode. I wasn't going to paint anything if the house was coming down. Luckily, the client had purchased the paint and she was going to pay me by the hour. The project I was going to be painting was going to take me about 5 hours total, $125. Well, the pest guy looked all around the house, pulled a few more outlet covers off with the same results, all packed with unalive insects. He then changed into full coveralls and climbed under the house. He was only there for a few minutes, maybe 3. Out he comes and declares the house a total loss. The floorboards, he said, were hanging on by a thread. The walls were all soft and about to be pushed over. The entire house could collapse at any moment. I packed my tools and said my goodbyes. I told her not to worry about paying me for my time. I'd been there for about an hour. She had much bigger problems to deal with. That was really kind of you. Oh, just for a paint job, you discover that this house is just going to collapse. I guess it's not worth just putting a pretty face. He would be literally putting a pretty face on an awful problem. Hope this 75-year-old woman found a place to live after that, or found some other accommodations. She might even still be able to sell the house if someone is really into DIY. Story 4. I did apartment maintenance for a while. We started quarterly inspections, and the first day we opened a door, and the smell that came out was indescribable. The man who was with me was ex-military, and he said that we were about to find a body. In the maintenance community, this tends not to be a matter of if you ever find a body, but when. He told me that he would go in alone if I was uncomfortable with it, but I went in too. We didn't find a body, but we found a mountain of trash that took up the entire dining area, and honestly, just trash, mostly food packaging everywhere, and that accounted for a lot of the smell. We also found a dog, a very sweet golden retriever that was starved for attention. It was obviously being left to just pee and poo all through the unit. It probably hadn't been outside in weeks based on the smell and general condition of the unit. We went outside, locked up, and called the property manager for her to come by. While we were waiting, he came home. The look on his face when he saw us was terrifying. The manager talked to him, and they set a plan about cleanup and gave a time frame for him to get the unit back to regular. The other maintenance guy stayed with him for a while that evening. When we left the unit, he was sure that the guy would unalive himself that night. Turns out the renter had recently gone through a very rough divorce where his children had been removed from him with very little warning, and he was spiraling. I left the company before I learned how it all ended. I hope he's doing better. Poor guy. I hope he got through it as well. Story 5. My boyfriend is a locksmith. During the 2008 recession, Las Vegas had hundreds and thousands of homes that were getting repoed or abandoned. The company he worked for would have him go and change the locks to keep people out, and usually this happened in the middle of the night to limit the possibilities of running into ex-owners of the properties. I sometimes tagged along, mostly to explore some of the ridiculously big houses that people had just left, but helped some of the time. This one house looked totally normal from the outside. You couldn't tell any difference from any of the other cookie-cutter planned development homes. But inside, in every room, there were those timeout dolls. If you've never seen them, they're a doll that stands against the wall with its hand up to its face, and even more creepy, usually they have no face, but they look like a kid hiding their face and pouting after being put in a timeout. When I say they were in every room, I mean every single room. And not just one, but dozens, lining the walls. Not laying down, but standing up against every wall in the house. The house's electricity had been shut off, so all we had was flashlights. Walking into each room, it did not get less creepy seeing doll after doll. He's already afraid of dolls, and this made it so much worse. Altogether, we counted 63, but there might have been more. And now I know what I'm doing if I ever get evicted. Story 6 was a carrier for the post office. When you first start, you only have one route one day a week. Every other day, you cover for someone who calls in sick or is on vacation or something like that. So one day, I covered for a different carrier who was sick. I get to one house, and they have 4 packages. On the front door, there was a sign that said, "Please don't knock or ring. Just open the door and leave the packages behind the door." So I'm like, okay, this is weird, but whatever. It must happen a lot because the sign was old and dusty. So I open the door and go into the house. It's normal. I bend down to put the packages down neatly. As I rose back up, there was this old dude who had to be like 60 or 70 just standing there in tight-butt jeans, tight-butt tank top, with a clearly dyed jet black mustache drinking beer out of a can with a straw. I naturally got scared for a second, so I told him, "Sorry, you scared me. I didn't see you there." And he just says, "That's 'cause I wasn't here." So I just say, "Well, I'm sorry," and start to leave. And he says, "Hold up, where's so-and-so?" I say, "Oh, she's sick, so I'll be covering for her today and possibly tomorrow." And his words verbatim were, "Nice. Maybe she should stay sick a while. I'll make sure to wear something cute tomorrow." I fake laugh and got the heck up out of there. The most disturbing part about this is the fact he was drinking beer with a straw. The guy probably has a few postal workers buried in his backyard. Were any of you following along with this story and thinking Herbert from Family Guy? I almost read it in that voice. "Oh, well, I'm sorry." "Oh, maybe she should stay sick for a while. I'll make sure to wear something cute tomorrow." Oh, and now I'm realizing that voice just sounds like a very creepy version of Mickey Mouse. Story 7. Disturbing? Not at all. Weird? A bit. I was a medical equipment delivery guy for a couple years. Went into a dementia patient house and had to instruct his caretaker on how to set up a large E-tank of O2. As I was kneeling down, my phone went off with my really low-key notification tone, which was a singular beep. Well, the pet bird nearby seemed to have taken a shine to that noise and mimicked it perfectly in tone and volume. The caretaker and I looked at one another with her saying, I've been here for 6 years and he's never done that before. From then on, every time I delivered and knelt down to re-educate the caretaker, SOP demands it, that bird would instinctively ping me until I let my phone notification sound go off, after which the bird would celebrate by bobbing his head up and down and turning in a circle. The patience is staying. Something tells me a caretaker for a dementia patient would need quite a bit of it. Friendly reminder to check in on your older friends and family who choose to live alone or with very little supervision with home care. They miss you. A lot. Story 8. I'm a nanny. About 5 years ago, I took an after-school job with a family of 3, a mom and 3 daughters. When I went in for my interview, I noticed boxes of random stuff lining the stairs. No big deal. It seemed like maybe they didn't finish putting things away before I got there. We sat in the front room, which was sectioned off with folding room dividers. Again, not thinking anything crazy. This seemed like a nice job, and they made me an offer. A few days later, I show up with the kid after school, without being shown around. I walk in, and it's a completely different house. The folding partitions were put away, and every inch of the house was lined and stacked with unopened boxes of toys and random QVC-style packages. The boards of boxes and toys and more random stuff looked to be unopened for the most part. However, I don't think the kitchen or bathroom had ever been wiped down. The fridge was packed and most things were moldy. They had mentioned they had a few dogs and cats. I counted, and they had 5 dogs and at least 8 cats. I was trying to study the first day, and the cat jumped up and took a poop on the kitchen table next to me. The dogs would chew on whatever they liked and would track mud in from outside. I stayed there for 3 more shifts. The girl had ASD, which was challenging, but I couldn't even focus or begin to help her when she had a meltdown because of how much stuff was around that she could take, grab, and throw at me. I only worked for them for a week, but while quitting, the mom said I was insensitive for putting her daughter through having to acclimate to a new nanny. I told her she was doing herself, her children, and her pets a disservice by letting them live in a home so vile. Never regretted it. Story 9. Long ago, I did estimates for fire and water damage repairs for a restoration company. This couple had a smallish fire in their bedroom. When I entered the home, it's seemingly normal. Smells like smoke. There was a fire. Makes sense. They took me to the bedroom, and it was the mattress that had endured the majority of the fire, along with some of the wall above the head of the bed and smoke damage to the ceiling. Next to each side of the bed are 10-gallon buckets filled to the brim with cigarette butts and hundreds of spilled-over butts all over the floor. I was just in awe of how they could live like this in their bedroom, especially since the rest of their home seemed tidy and normal. Also completely beyond me why they wouldn't clean that junk up after the fire, if for no other reason than insurance adjusters being able to blame them rightly and possibly not pay out. How did the fire start? I asked, required to ask. No idea, the husband replied. Truly a mystery for the ages. Sounds like they had a system going. They had the gallon buckets to take the cigarette butts, but if they were all over the floor, why still have the buckets? Is it just out of habit at that point? Or if you're just going to have them on the floor like that, why bother? Why? Story 10. Real estate photographer. Seen plenty of corn cobs in women's underwear. Lots of herb lying around and kids skipping school to smash or get high, but one incident sticks out. Wasn't disturbing, but totally weird. Client was wealthy and had a very nice home. She and her husband were home while I was shooting, and I asked the woman if I could remove her pink robe, which was hanging on the shower door. She replied, "Feel free to put it on." Caught me off guard, but I just moved it aside. This woman was beautiful, by the way. Petite and fit. She has tasteful nude photos of her around the house. So I kept moving through the house to shoot, and I told her I was about to wrap up, but I needed to photograph her walk-in closet, to which she replied, "Try on anything you want." I didn't take her up on her offer. finished the shoot, and left. Just an overall weird shoot. Story 11. I'm an electrician, and I was troubleshooting a bad outlet in the bathroom of a former NFL player. I was taking all the outlets apart, following them to see if I could trace out the home runs, when he comes in and starts talking football. We're in the middle of talking when he just walks over to the toilet and starts taking a dump. I couldn't see him, but there was just a little pony wall between us. He didn't even stop telling his story. It was crazy. I walked out because of the smell. He came out a little later, and it was like nothing ever happened. That's probably normal for the guy. Doubt. Training camps and whatnot are known for having stellar bathrooms. I remember a story about a player being given a game ball by the coach because he managed to take a dump while on the bench in the middle of the game without someone noticing. Story 2 was a carpet cleaner. Corn. So much corn. You guys like so much corn. Probably the weirdest and most disturbing was the gay couple who had an entire room of framed photos of them in different positions and outfits or various states of undress. They liked to watch while I cleaned that room. I kept my eyes low and didn't focus on any specific one or make eye contact with them. Just kept about my business steaming the carpets and pretended there wasn't anything unusual about what I or they were doing. Definitely a weird kink of some kind. My area historically has been very conservative and repressed, so I don't know, maybe that factors in. They tipped well, so I kept my mouth shut for the most part and just made sure when their address came up that I always got that job. I guess it wasn't weird enough for him to shun the money. And I am almost sure that he's probably leaving something out, that they really wanted a little more from him than he was professionally obligated to do. There had to have been an offer. I think the tips, there was something going on with the tips. There was some talk. Story 13. I delivered pizza for about 2 years. I had to deliver to a local motel pretty frequently. One day I went to deliver, and a large lady, I'm talking 6 foot, 220 pounds, was decked out in dominatrix attire. She answered the door, ready to get down to business, then immediately closed the door and threw a robe on. She apologized profusely and then tipped me $10 for the situation. Sure, I could have gone in, but when these situations come up at 16, you never play them like you think you would. Also, she took one look at me and probably thought I was way too young to be her client. Dang babyface, I look like I'm 20. I'll be 30 soon. You're lucky that she wasn't expecting her client to show up as a pizza delivery guy, who she's supposed to forcibly abduct and discipline. Story 14. Used to deliver oxygen to people's homes. Saw plenty of weird things. Lots of hoarders. But this one took the cake. He didn't want to let us into his house, but I had to do a home safety assessment before I could set up the equipment. He was anxious about letting me in because his house was a mess. He kept telling me about his messy house. Come to find out, it wasn't just messy. It was filled with 200 chickens. He was proud of his show chickens and wouldn't let them live in a barn or coop. The smell was unbearable. Other than that, he was a super nice guy. That's probably why he needed oxygen. Probably caught an infection from the bird feces. Story 15. I once helped renovate an old building that was a house but converted to a business and was super run down when my employer bought it. We did a ton of work, including removing subflooring and ceilings. We found a hidden cellar in the back suite, once the kitchen or mudroom. The thing was filled with trash and random odds and ends. There were GI water ration cans dated 1956. In the middle suite, we kept finding spoons in the ceiling as we were taking it down. It was weird, but then we realized that it was where a junkie kept ditching their spoons. Suite, as in office space, not menswear. It's possible the little cellar was for making moonshine. The house I lived in when I was little had one. So there used to be addicts living in there, maybe squatting in there, hiding their spoons, and now it's going to be a place of business. Do you think gentrification was happening in this area? Sounds like it. What kind of business was this guy trying to put in there? Maybe it was a halfway house or a recovery house. You never know. Story 16. I'm a face painter who does children's birthday parties. I've never had any super sketchy experiences, just a few rundown homes, but the kids always have fun. I went to one house, kind of messy and smelly, but no big deal. I started setting up my supplies and I heard a weird beep sound around me. I look up to see a guinea pig running through a clear plastic tube attached to the ceiling. Then I take a good look around the house and notice the whole place is covered with a network of guinea pig tubes. The mom noticed me looking around and nonchalantly told me they have like 10 guinea pigs. I had hamsters as a kid. I always wanted a setup like this, but my mom wouldn't let me. It's a rodent paradise. Story 17. I delivered pizza, but for older customers, I'd always go into their homes to bring it inside for those who were severely handicapped or just didn't have the strength to bring their food inside. One time, I delivered to this lady who was covered in cat hair, head to toe, and the inside of her house was rancid. I mean, I couldn't go in there without holding my breath every time. One time I went, and she had in her kitchen on a table a paper plate with what looked like teeth. And I mean a lot of teeth, different colors and shapes, and just horrifically repulsive. Don't know whose teeth they were. From what I could tell, she had all, if not most. Haven't heard any stories about her since, so I'm guessing she moved or something else. Never will forget that smell, though. Ugh, poor kitties. Just left to starve and perish of heat stroke.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 18. In high school, I had a summer job where we would clean out houses owned by banks, like foreclosures. Owners perished and had no one to take the house, etc. Usually, it was just furniture, old clothes, that sort of stuff. Opened the door to one house, though, and it immediately smelled like complete poop and rot. Usually, it's a fridge that was turned off and never got cleaned out, but oh no, this was much worse. All throughout the house, there were around 25 cats, all perished, that had been there for who knows how long, all in different states of rot and decay, some covered in maggots, some covered in ants, but all very dead. If I had to guess, the last few to perish had to have been unalive for at least a month prior to us going in. And this was mid-August, so they had all been in there all summer, just baking in the heat. And what did we do, you ask? Went back outside, got bandanas or extra shirts or whatever we could find, tied them around our faces, layered up on gloves, grabbed some snow shovels and garbage bags, and got to work. Probably took at least 3 hours before we finally got them all out, and most of them just broke apart when we scooped them up. Must have puked 10 or 15 times in those 3 hours. Nastiest stuff ever. Story 19. Was a firefighter another time in my life. Had a middle-of-the-night call to a mobile home for an elderly lady once. We walk in, and it's dark, but as my eyes start to adjust, I think, oh, that's weird wallpaper. I keep looking around. It's on the ceiling, too. Weird, inconsistent patterns and rectangle shapes. Eyes adjust some more while we're talking to her. What the hell? Are those puzzles? She had hundreds of puzzles that she had glued when completed, and then glued them to every surface of her mobile home. Walls, ceilings, living room, bedroom, every square inch covered. Weird, but you do you. Especially in your own home. Certainly not as bad as most ITT. That's actually pretty sweet. Story 20. Inspecting an oven a tenant had complained was smoking. Yep, it definitely was. Tenants thought an oven could be used like an outdoor grill. Had been cooking meat directly on the oven racks, and all that glorious fat and grease just accumulated in the bottom of the oven and the little drawer underneath. For months. How he didn't burn down the whole dang building is beyond me. I also patched a bullet hole in a shared wall ceiling between apartments. One tenant lets his girlfriend play with his loaded gun. She stupidly and accidentally fires it into the next-door neighbor's apartment. Neighbor was playing video games and didn't notice the bullet coming through his wall into the ceiling. Had no clue until the gun-owning boyfriend knocked at his door in a panic and was relieved to see him alive. Whoopsie! Nice of him to check in. Glad everyone is okay. Had a chuckle at not noticing a bullet coming through your house. I'd like to imagine he was playing Animal Crossing. Story 21. Food bank delivery to homebound elders. I always fill 2 banana boxes, around 1.5 feet by 3 feet deep, of all types of food and deliver them to his house. One, after delivering to him for 3 years, I have to come inside because he hurt his foot. He had never thrown out a single box. They lined every wall and entrance. He built a castle around his bed and a series of paths through his house. It was like this pillow fort you would make as a kid, but with boxes. I asked him if he wanted help getting rid of them, and he said no, that it was fun and helped with his dementia. He's super fun. I'm letting it stay. Story 22. Not my story, but a journeyman I worked with told me a good one. We're commercial Sparkies, but being a smaller company, we occasionally take residential jobs when there's not a lot of work. So they were doing some work at an apartment complex, and they were inside one unit that this weird lady lived in. Apparently, she was really friendly and talkative, but just kind of gave off a vibe like she wasn't all there. My journeyman asked to use her bathroom at one point, and apparently it was covered wall to wall, ceiling to floor with magazine cutouts. Nothing graphic or obscene, just random pictures from random magazines, cut and pasted everywhere. Even in the shower, which was freaking filthy. Like the tub had a layer of grime and obviously hadn't been used or cleaned in ages. He said he just waited for lunch or until he got home to pee for the rest of his time there. Story 23. I'm training to be a residential property appraiser in Miami, Florida. The guy I work for does everything from $10+ million mansions and foreclosures. A good rule in the business is never open the fridge in a foreclosure. It's no longer '07. So most foreclosures we run into are old people who've got no family and can't take care of themselves and can't take care of the properties. Super sad stuff to run into. Worst thing I've seen is a hoarder who obviously had some mental deficiencies. The appraisal was for a refinance on his property. The place stunk. We couldn't get into half the rooms because the doors were boarded up and he had a ton of dogs. The guy was super confused why we were there and said his bank guy told him the appraisal fee was about 3 times what we normally charge. Luckily on that one, we basically told the bank it looked like his bank guy was trying to scam the dude without explicitly saying so. They canceled the appraisal, so we didn't get paid for it, but me and my boss agreed the bad karma was worth the loss. I wouldn't say bad karma, but just trying to be straight up and calling someone on their BS. Hope the old dude got into a better spot. Story 24. I was a delivery boy in high school and would occasionally deliver to 2 people who genuinely freaked me the hell out. The first one was an incredibly large man with elephantiasis. It's tough to believe in God after seeing something like that. Plus, the smell. This one and the next one probably didn't bathe. Ever. It was really sad. The second one, I think, had HIV or AIDS before we had real treatments. He had what looked to me like hundreds, if not 1,000 injection marks all over his body. He lived all alone in a small mobile home that had metal stairs going up to reach the door, and by the time I reached the first step, the smell was already upon me. These people lived horrible and lonely lives. The second guy would often tip me with wet, crumpled-up bills that smelled like him. I think the second one was an extreme horse addict. They do it enough, and they can't keep using the regular veins, so they have to get creative and do things like shoot up between their toes. Story 25. I used to help with dispatch calls at an ISP. One day I got a call from a tech who was always a joy to chat with. He was always super laid back and easygoing, and would always joke around the phone for a few minutes. One day, he calls in, and this is how the call goes. Me. Yo, what's crack-a-lackin'? Tech. Hey, I wanted to call to formally let dispatch know that I will be leaving a job early and unfinished. At this point, I was super concerned because he was never formal about anything with dispatch. Me. Okay, let me pull up the accounts. Gets information. What's going on? Tech. There are chickens everywhere and chicken poop covering everything. Chicken poop is what burned out the POE. I let the customer know that this would be a charged service call, and they tried to get the chickens to attack me. I took the notes down and sent an email to management since the tech had been threatened and let him go to his next job. Apparently, chicken people were infamous for this, but the account was never noted, so we had no way of knowing what the tech was getting into. I don't remember if the company closed the account or crazy chicken people did, but they called in every day for a few weeks to complain about how unprofessional the tech was and how we were a terrible company. It was a good time. They tried to get the chickens to attack me as the only beautiful ending this story needed. Story 26. I posted this before a while back, but used to work pest control. Went into student accommodation to deal with insects. I can't remember what type. Carpet moths or bed bugs, maybe? Anyway, that's not the point of the story. This one room is fairly clean, but we have to spray all fabrics with the chemical in question to prevent any eggs from having a safe place to gestate. So open up suitcases, wardrobes, that sort of thing. One suitcase is full of used tampons that she was saving for who knows what reason, actually. And I don't want to know. Nasty stuff, that. Didn't mention it, just did the job and tried to avoid eye contact in the end. I know a guy who dated a girl who collected hers, as well as tissues she had used. Hair, fingers, and toenails, scabs, just like almost anything that came off or out of her body. It would have been cool to know why she did all this, but the bigger question was why he stayed with her after knowing about this. Story 27. I used to do flooring, and when we had to get up the subflooring due to water damage, underneath it, there was a black garbage bag. When I opened said bag, it had a bunch of women's clothes in it. Didn't think anything about it until we dumped it out and found bloody ripped underwear and torn dresses. Told the owner we had forgotten some stuff at work and wouldn't be back until tomorrow. Called the police and never went back. The house was soon up for sale a month or so later. I can't imagine that it was the current owners. Oh, oops, forgot about my debauchery/unaliving bag beneath the floor and the contractors found it. Certainly it had belonged to a previous owner or whomever built the house. Story 28. I work as a maintenance guy in a 500-plus unit community. Let me tell you, I've been working here for 7 years and we've seen it all. From someone's house being completely infested with roaches to a person whose house was floor-to-floor ceiling hoarded with old newspapers. The one house I will never forget belonged to a lady who had a lot of mental health issues. I went over to her unit to check for damages after Hurricane Florence. When I went in, I was overcome with the smell of pure sewage. I asked her if her toilet was acting up. She said she didn't know. I was like, okay, I'll check it for you. When I stepped in the bathroom, there was poop piled above the rim of the toilet. I asked her how long her toilet had been non-functioning. She said she didn't know. She doesn't flush the toilet because that's how the devil gets in her house. Instead of the devil, she invoked a Golgothan poop demon. Story 29. I'm a property assessor. We occasionally need to do walkthroughs of new homes when they're not traditional builds and/or unique. I had made an appointment to review a new house that was infill in an older neighborhood. Beautiful house. Was modern, but managed to not look out of place amongst the rest of the houses that it abutted. I was met at the door by Mrs. and 2 preschoolers. Very nice people. So I'm doing a room-to-room, making notes, asking about finishes, etc., and I get to the spare bedroom. Boom. Floor-to-floor ceiling Nazi shrine. It was very artistically done and was full of artifacts. One of the kids says, "This is Dad's office." I didn't even bat an eyelash, just kept moving. noted floor and wall finish, and moved to the next room. Thanked Mrs. for her time and hit the road. Pretty tame by this post standards, but I'll always remember it. I have a bunch of Star Wars Legos in our spare bedroom. This is Dad's office, where he plans to annex der Sudetenland. Story 30. I used to do crisis mental health assessments to determine if the person needed to be forced to the hospital. One person was paranoid that his bathroom was contaminated and that black tar from cigarettes would rain down on him if he went in there. So he'd be going to the bathroom in a bucket and hadn't showered in months. His bedroom had some poop buckets in it, but also at least 200 empty cartons of goat milk because that was the only thing he'd eat. Yeah, we took him to the hospital. Mr. Patient probably didn't thank you, so I will. I appreciate that there are people like you willing to do work like that. Story 31. Handyman here was called to a blocked sink at a lady's house. So I get to the door and she opens it, and the house was like Dolores Umbridge's office. Every wall, shelf, and horizontal surface was covered in decorative plates, figurines, teapots, and stuff. The hallway was exactly me and one plumbing toolbox wide between occasional tables and shelves with more tat on them. That was the most nervous, the slowest walk I made through anyone's house, trying not to knock anything over. She was friendly enough and made tea, but even then I had to turn around slowly and be careful not to bump into anything or knock anything over. Please tell me you didn't drink the tea. She might have put Verita serum in it. Story 32. Fire alarm inspector. Working in a cheap long-term hotel and knocking on a door where a larger man dressed in essentially a purple bikini opens the door half asleep. I entered to test the smoke detector and tried to keep my eyes off the bed, but I knew I had seen something. Tried not to look, but I did, and there's a big old purple corn cob next to the TV remote. The detector then decides to not alarm in a timely manner, so I'm just staring at the wall hoping it will alarm so I can get out of the room. Story 33. I tutor privately, so sometimes I meet clients at their homes. One lady had a huge shrine to Bob Berdella, which is really confusing because usually women attracted to serial unalivers gravitate towards the attractive ones. The only Bob worth building a shrine to is Ross. You can have a Newhart candle or maybe even a bong for Marley or a sweater vest for Saget, but that's freaking it, man. Story 34. I was installing alarm systems, and one day I went out on a service call, stepped into a literal cesspool, and thanked the deities for my plastic booties to protect my shoes from walking on their disgusting carpet. Was shown to the alarm panel, and when I pulled the panel off the wall to see why it was not powering on, an army of roaches started scurrying out of the wall. Turns out the panel perished because several roaches had electrocuted themselves on the circuit board. No one's robbing that hellhole. Story 35. I was a paramedic in Oakland, and once I was in a home where a child had been bitten by a rat in her crib. As we were standing there talking to the mother about her options, a rat walked up to one of the firefighters and bit his boot. The firefighters stomped the rat to expiration, and the rat was taken to the health department for testing. That was a strange situation. Story 36. I went to install a tube-style skylight in the bathroom. Owners had the gayest bathroom I've ever seen. It was impressive. Think Roman decor, marble, and everything involving a dong. Light switch, TP holder, tower rack, shower curtain hooks, all dongs. I just understand these self-stimulation chambers. Story 37. I'm a personal care assistant for elderly clients. I go into their homes and essentially just assist them with day-to-day activities. While organizing one of my clients' wardrobes, I found a stack of about 20 unopened Magnum Trojan condoms. This particular client is in her late 80s. Get it, Granny? Story 38. This makes me feel so much less paranoid about the cleanliness of my house when professionals come over. Right. I'm over here freaking out about dust on the cords if the cable guys have to come over and how they probably think I'm filthy. Story 39. A few years back, I worked as an electrician. I found a guy with a rifle lying next to him where he had tried to blow his head off through his mouth, but he had missed the vital parts. Brain and blood was all over the bed, but he was still breathing. He was in a coma state of mind, and heard later that he perished that day. Story 40. A girl with social anxiety who hid under her bed when the plumbers came, and then the plumbers caught her under there. And then she ran and hid in the bathroom until they left. Wonder if those plumbers are online. I most definitely want to hear their side. Story 41. My uncle is a handyman, and he went in to do some work for a family, and the toilet was just feces. Not like someone didn't flush, rather nobody did, and the bowl was just crammed full of hardened stool, which had clearly been an accumulating scenario. Story 42. I once saw a carpeted bathroom. I once went into a house with a carpeted bathroom. There were mushrooms growing out of the carpet around the toilet. I had forgotten and blocked this memory until your post. Story 43. I was visiting someone's home to see an antique table I was interested in buying. The walls had black spots all around. When asked, he told me, "Those are from candles, which I use to burn mosquitoes." Story 44. I painted a girl's room one time while she laid in bed and played on her phone and took naps. I knocked and expected her to leave, but she just laid back down. It was very strange.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.